following is the mission profile of the RSAT 1G mission atop a Zeus 641. The Zeus 641 rocket is the second largest rocket ISEA provides for commercial and in-house launches, using 4 strap-on side-mounted solid rocket boosters of AJ-60 and a single RD-180 core engine. The Zeus 641 rocket will produce nearly 2.5 million pounds of thrust to lift itself away from the launch pad. So the roll program will begin at approximately plus 7 seconds after liftoff, along with the pitch program. The pitch, yaw, and roll maneuvers will position the Zeus rocket with the RSAT 1G payload on its proper downrange heading away from the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. The launch will take place at either Space Launch Complex 41, Kerbal Launch Complex 41, which looks the exact same as Space Launch Complex 41, or at Kerbal Launch Complex 1, or at the KSC Launch Complex 1, or the Kerbal Space Center Launch Complex 1. The Zeus 641 will break the sound barrier at approximately 38 seconds after liftoff. Maximum dynamic pressure will follow shortly thereafter. And you can see we have now passed the Mach 1 transients. The vehicle is now transonic at plus 35 seconds. The first flight milestones are Mach 1 and max Q. The vehicle at this point will throttle to maintain a 3.6G throttle. Will maintain the 3.6G throttle segment by throttling up and down the RD-180 core engine. The vehicle will continue rolling onto a launch azimuth of 90 degrees, correction of 95 degrees, which you can see here on the heading mark. You can also see the roll. The vehicle will achieve a roll of 90 degrees by about the time it is traveling half a kilometer per second. The Zeus Type 6 fairing is 5 meters in diameter and encapsulates the Minotaur upper stage, along with the RSAT 1G payload. This mission is set to launch on August 16th, 2017. Correction, August 19th, 2017. Following launch, it will take a southeasterly trajectory away from the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center. And you can see the roll maneuver is coming to an end at this point, at an altitude of 21 kilometers and a velocity of 780 meters per second. This is the second largest Zeus configuration. At 96 seconds, the 4 solid rocket boosters will burn out. At 97 seconds, or 1 minute 37 seconds, the first 2 solid rocket boosters will be jettisoned, followed about 3 seconds later by the second pair of solid rocket boosters. This ensures that they will not collide with each other on their way down and cause destruction and havoc on the areas on which they land. And you can see here the first pair jettisoning, and we're coming up on the second pair, and there go the second pair of solid rocket boosters. You can see that it occurred about 27 kilometers downrange at a velocity of 1.2 kilometers per second and an altitude of 49 kilometers. This is the added benefit of using more solid rocket boosters, is the additional delta V provided from the spacecraft. And since this mission will use a triple burn geostationary transfer orbit mission, there will be 3. The triple burn GTO means that there will be 3 burns. Each burn will provide an additional boost. The first burn of the Minotaur is to achieve orbit. The second burn to boost the apogee up to 35,786 kilometers. And the third burn is to put it onto a high eccentricity, onto a high perigee GTO burn, even though the spacecraft could do the GTO burn all in one, simply due to the fact of its 4 kilonewton R40B bipropellant engine. The spacecraft weighs about 6.7 tons, fully fueled, and the entire rocket weighs over 500 metric tons fully fueled. Correction on that. It will launch east over the Atlantic Ocean. Flying east allows us to reduce the amount of debris that could potentially fall on inhabited areas. Due to the fact of this being a triple burn GTO mission, on the day of launch, the live coverage will conclude about 45 minutes after launch, and will pick up again with the beginning of the GTO burn, with the beginning of the periapsis raise burn. This second burn will also reduce our inclination to about 25 degrees. And the third burn will change the inclination even more, and you can see at 120 kilometers we have staged off the fairing at a downrange distance of 162 kilometers, and the Minotaur forward load reactor has jettisoned. The solar panels will not deploy on the day of launch. That will be corrected in the guidance, or there will be an action group, or there will be a specific sequence that the flight controllers in ISEA's Mission Control in Charlotte, North Carolina, and ISEA's Flight Control and the Payload Flight Control at the Toronto Space Systems factory just outside of Toronto Epix Launch Systems outside of Toronto, Ontario will be able to control. You can see the vehicle has passed into the vacuum of space and is now maintaining the 3.6G throttling segment in preparation for booster engine cutoff. The Zeus booster engine will cut off at approximately 5 minutes into the mission. Following that, it will separate use 8 retro rockets to pull itself away from the vehicle. These retro rockets burn HTPB. Following that, the Minotaur stage will ignite. The Minotaur stage burns liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen to provide thrust in order to boost the payload onto its actual geostationary transfer orbit. The Zeus 641 is the most advanced guidance system ISEA has in its manifest. And this will be the only launch of the 641 configuration this year. The Zeus 641 is comparable in its performance to the Atlas V 541 rocket. The Atlas V 541 has a 5-meter wide fairing, Centaur engine, yada yada yada. You all probably know what it means. Coming up on the booster engine cutoff and booster separation momentarily. As you can see, the vehicle is traveling at nearly 6 kilometers per second. And no, the forward boat tail is not supposed to do that. But here we have the Minotaur engine ignition. This engine starts up to allow the vehicle to pick up velocity, and it will begin a slight pitch up following ignition. It allows the vehicle to increase its velocity to the required velocity for the geostationary transfer orbit. You can see the booster sort of falling away there along with the interstage adapter. Now Zeus 641 will be used in May of next year to launch the Griffin Mars package to Mars. can see that it maintains a fairly high flight angle. It will pitch up. This is perfectly nominal in the flight. It will pitch up and then pitch down, and then it will pitch up again. This is perfectly nominal. MECO, or main engine cutoff, or Minotaur engine cutoff, will be at will follow the first burn of the Minotaur stage. This will put it onto a geostationary transfer orbit. This will put it into a low Earth orbit. Following cutoff of the Minotaur, it will coast, and then it will reignite. We don't have specific mission timings yet, as the mission is still in the works, but this is approximately what you will see on day of launch on our Twitch account. Our Twitch account is where you will be able to view all mission profile. We'll be able to view all launches and press conferences, along with Hawk static fire tests, should they need to be broadcast. ISEA's major missions this year are the Gagarin Station and Gagarin Station Soyuz flights. The Gagarin Station is a space station designed and built by the ISEA that will launch atop a modified Hawk Heavy with a Raptor vacuum engine upper stage. The RapVac engine will allow the Hawk Heavy upper stage to get more velocity out of its systems. As you can see, the RL-10C1 engine is generating almost 102 kilonewtons of thrust to boost the vehicle into a low Earth orbit, followed shortly thereafter by a geostationary transfer orbit and a high inclination periapsis transfer orbit. The vehicle will pitch up. This is perfectly nominal. It's just in order to raise the periapsis out of the atmosphere, which you can see is at negative 3,000 kilometers. We're going to enter the time warped mode now so that you don't have to sit through all of this. But the vehicle will pitch up to 54 degrees very briefly, and then we'll continue, and then we'll pitch down again. Our orbital track is the blue one. This is our orbital track, the blue orbital track. There are more satellites in-game, but that's just because this is a development and testing save. This is where we test all of our flight profiles for various missions. And there are no classified. And we also test out the classified missions, but those will be marked under a different designation. So on the actual launch days, we can just turn those off. As you can see, the altitude is passing 258 kilometers. The vehicle is sort of doing this oscillation in order to keep the vertical speed low and increase horizontal speed. You can track our periapsis here in the orbital info window, and our surface information here. We're downrange 2,400 kilometers. Unlike the last mission profile of the NRO L109 mission, this mission will be fully broadcast and is fully public. These missions are funded by the United Nations, who funds the International Space Exploration Agency and allows us to put up our own relay network. And the United Nations has contracted the ISEA to put up its own space satellite positioning network. You can see here that the vehicle is flying at an altitude of 255 kilometers, coming up on the IAP vanish. Once the in-atmosphere periapsis vanishes, the vehicle will be in a ballistic phase. or as we call it, the BAL phase. The first BAL phase will allow us to get into position for our geostationary transfer burn at the equatorial descending node. Followed by that, which will be approximately a 7 to 8 minute burn, the second BAL phase will be over 3 hours. This second BAL phase will allow the spacecraft time to get into position for its perigee change burn. So you can see here that we are plotting for the GTO burn. The Minotaur stage, because it uses liquid hydrogen and oxygen, is far more efficient than the Zeus booster stage that it flew on. Following the turn, it will enter a coasting phase lasting just under 15 minutes. And again, we will use time warp so that you don't have to sit through a lot of the monotony of the coasting periods that you will see on the actual mission. IACA is proud to be partnered with British Engineering and Science to launch 4 satellites, to launch a constellation of 4 satellites, the first of which will go later this year. As you can see, the Minotaur engines start up for the second burn. This second Minotaur engine burn will last about 6 minutes and a half in order to boost the apogee up to 35,786 kilometers above the equator. So you can see the apogee rise here in the orbital information, and we'll go into 4 times time acceleration so that you, again, don't have to sit through most of the monotony of the burn. IACA is proud to be launching these missions, especially since this is the first payload of the follow-on network for RSAT and the IACA Deep Space Network 1 mission, which has a 300 gigameter antenna strapped to it. This antenna will allow spacecraft in deep space and solar orbits to communicate with IACA Mission Control in North Carolina and IACA science teams located around the world at various space agencies. So you can see we're doing also a bit of an inclination change to reduce our actual orbital inclination as we are coming up to Minotaur engine cutoff number 2, or MECO 2. At this point, the Minotaur will have approximately 900 and some odd meters per second of delta V left. So the vehicle is performing as expected. And we have Minotaur engine cutoff number 2 on an inclination of 27.5 degrees.